are going to be streaming to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch.
Sounds good.
So the cool thing about StreamYard is like you can like stream to a bunch of different platforms at one time, and then it'll pull, like, when we get comments and stuff like that, we'll get everything. I'll get everything in one feed, and then I can like pull comments onto the stream and
that's cool.
And do cool stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, and Dan's the tech guru because I know nothing. And, like, cannot like
likewise
anything out.
I try my best.
I don't know what that means.
It sounds very fancy and good, so I'm glad.
It's very much worth the money, because like this whole program gives you like a whole bunch of it gives you a whole bunch of like cool features, and like with the multi-streaming, and then you could do pre-recorded streams. You could do what I like is that it does the individual recordings.
Okay.
Because when we first started, initially we were just recording on one track in Anika's office, because I didn't know how else to do it. I thought it would be easier. But then what happened was, like, my mic would be too loud and her mic would be too soft. And then we would have to boot, like, when I tried to boost her audio, it would make mine sound bad.
Gotcha.
So we just decided to do it this way, and that way we can control, like, we could balance her mic with, right.
Yeah.
So I guess we can start just by, hold on one second. Okay. So to our one listener on Twitch, who I think it's like a bot, because it's the same user.
One?
I think it's the same person. I think it's a bot. And I keep saying, hey, if you're listening. If
it's really not a bot, that's really cool. Thanks for listening. If it's a bot,
thank you.
You know,
yeah.
I guess thanks for listening still, but
either way, your presence is appreciated.
Exactly. So everybody who's watching it now or listening to this after the fact, we thank you so much for tuning in. We have an amazing guest here on the show this morning. She is the owner, proprietor, host of the Stiicky Eddie podcast. Chelsea, welcome.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me. It's an honor. Truly, I'm so happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you.
Thank you.
So how's everybody's week been? Let's talk about that first.
Interesting. Interesting. If you don't mind, I'll go first, I guess.
Go ahead.
So I've been in a period of transition lately, as far as what I want to do professionally and long term. I've been networking my butt off this week and trying to pull some things together. Doing the show has just really made me very passionate about addiction recovery and advocacy. And I've had some wonderful, wonderful conversations with people on every end of the spectrum, as far as that goes this week. So it's been really cool. I've taken a personal risk and decided to resign from my day job to take some personal time and really focus on what I'm doing with the podcast and see if I can make some other projects happen. So it's been interesting, and I feel really energized and empowered by this whole thing. And I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you guys. So it's been a cool week.
That must have been a really tough decision to decide to like walk away from a full-time income.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm definitely lucky. It's not an easy thing. I was with my previous position for 12 years. So it did not come lightly. But if there's anything that this past, 16, 18 months has taught me, it's we need to dive in sometimes with both feet and take risks Hopefully there will be a big payoff in the end. But I just want to do something to honor my dad's legacy. So it's happening. We're making it happen.
Well, we wish you the best in all of those endeavors,
Thank
and
you.
let us know about them as they happen.
Of course. You guys will probably play a big part. So.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Catherine will be our first recurring guest. So if you'd like, you could be our second recurring guest and friend of the pod.
Absolutely. I'd be honored.
But it that whole thing that you were, struggling to deal with, I mean, was something that I struggled with as well, because there were quite a few times, in my graduate school training, and even like after I graduated, like while I was working, where I seriously contemplated, quitting social work and all of that and doing something completely different. And my buddy even said, like, one of my best friends, Tom, who I was telling Anika about like the last couple of weeks, he offered to get me a job working for the railroad as a conductor. And I was like, and he was like, you laugh, Dan, but like conductors make so much money.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Like if you work for the railroad, like you could easily make six figures.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And I thought about it, but then I was like, when you work for the railroad, I feel like it's just like it's the same shit every single day, and I don't think I could deal with doing the same job every single day. One of the things I like about my job now is that you see something completely different every day. It's an emergency room, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. And to keep me centered, to keep me focused, I have this podcast because it gives me something to do in my spare time where, yeah, it's a break from what I do on the day-to-day basis, but it still keeps me focused on addiction recovery and things like that. So I kind of got off on a tangent really quick, and you'll realize that that's something also that we do here.
I love that.
Is that, I was like, I don't want to give up on I don't want to give up on recovery and like helping the recovery community just yet. So let me stick around for a little bit longer.
Well, also too, do you have to know that song, the Working on the Railroad song, in order to be a conductor?
Oh, dude, can I tell you something?
Is that a rule?
when he first told me that he got a job working for the railroad.
That's what you said.
Mm-hmm.
But see, there's a reason why the lyrics are what they are, because you've been working on the railroad all the live long day, and it's like
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think there's something about working with people working in addiction and recovery that's just kind of like you're always dealing with different things. And like, yes, the stories may be similar. Yes, the issues may be similar that come up, but like they're so individualized and people really truly have like their own stories and like working towards like, especially what Dan and I do. And my role is a little different because I do private practice. So like, I really get to know people on like a long-term basis and get to know like their full stories and what's going on and how to support them on a weekly basis a lot of times. And so it's really cool. But I totally understand because there have been plenty of times that I'm like, I want to do something else. I can't do this. This is too much for me, and one of the things that I did that I'm lucky enough because I'm in private practice is to be able to add like more holistic elements. So like I add a lot of like meditation and yoga and stuff like that. So I can try to help people really have like much more like fully balanced lives and do those things, which is really cool because I think it can help a lot of people in the recovery community, whether
absolutely
it's recovery from, substances, any addiction, mental health, doesn't matter. Being able to have more tangible outlets sometimes is really helpful.
I think at some point we were planning to do like a meditation stream where we were going to have Anika like do like a guided meditation, and you're going to have some of our friends, like our podcasting friends, former guests and whatnot, just participate. We still have to do that. But we did.
I love that idea, though. That's a good one.
But let me tell you, she's good at it. Like that, when we did the meditation stream, I think it was.
I don't even remember what episode.
Give me a sec, I'll find out.
We fell asleep. We were so relaxed. We don't remember.
I think the meditation stream was episode 11, and we're up to number 31 now. This is episode 31 we're doing.
Congratulations, you guys, by the way. Like, this is a lot of work, and you guys, 31 episodes is a lot. So Anika, I'm not gonna lie to you. I really thought that we were not gonna make it to 31 episodes.
Why?
Just because I know, not because of you, not because of me, because of myself.
No problem here, Dan.
No, just because usually, this is just something that happens when you struggle with ADHD. And Anika, maybe you'll agree. I'm serious. Is when, like, one of the things that people do when they have ADHD is they set these big lofty goals, like these big long-term goals. And somewhere along the way, they get so overwhelmed with what it is that they're trying to do that they end up just giving up on it because they can't deal with all the shit that goes on.
I wonder if I'm undiagnosed.
You never know.
You just described a big part of my life.
You know, well, it's so funny because like I have always like viewed the podcast. I'm like, well, let's just keep recording and see how it goes. Like that's like, because that's just the mindset that I'm in, right? And like, especially because of like a lot of like the yoga and mindfulness and things like that. Like I try to really just kind of see things that way, but I could totally understand, Dan, how you kind of like felt like, okay, yeah, I don't know if I can do this.
It's a lot of work. It is. It's a lot of work.
To be honest with you, I've kind of worked it into my weekly routine now. I mean, it kind of sucks that I have to get up like super early, 6 days out of the week now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It's different. Like when you wake up early on a day that you don't have to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but like, I mean, it's really it's really not that bad. I mean, worst comes to worst, if I'm still tired after we record, I could just go back to bed and, and do all that. But, Michelle's off today as well, so we got a whole bunch of stuff we need to do after this. But I forgot where I was going.
Tangents.
Oh, so when we were talking about ADHD. When I was a little kid, my mother was a special ed teacher for her
cool.
Like that was her career. And she noticed that like I was doing things that were, typical of a child with ADHD. And she would have, like when I was very young, like in kindergarten, first grade, she had me tested like once or twice. And she would tell my teachers, like, I think he has ADHD. And the teachers were like, all right, we'll keep an eye on it. And like, we'll let you know if we notice anything that, could be symptomatic of ADHD. And they all said, he's fine. They all like, Dan's fine. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think while I was in graduate school, I saw someone and he was like, yeah, I think you actually have ADHD, because I described like all the issues I had been having. And I said to my mom, I was like, Mom, I think I have ADHD. I saw someone and they told me that they think I have it. And she's like, I knew you had it. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She was like, Dan, I had been telling your teachers for years that I thought you had it. And everyone said I was fine.
Which is one of the really interesting things with ADHD is that like some people like overfunction and like overcompensate in other aspects, right? So like it's harder to pick up on ADHD over the years. And so like as like schoolwork or like career wise, it gets harder and harder. That's typically like when you see like kind of like more people coming in. So in elementary school, you see a lot of kids struggling, right? And getting diagnosed. In middle school, like 6th grade, again, like there's like another like cohort of kids that get diagnosed. High school,
Wow.
9th grade, another cohort. College, same thing. Graduate school. And so like each time you're like advancing to like a new level of education, the challenges are always increasing, and people who have overcompensated in the past before find it harder and harder to do so.
That is so interesting. Wow. But I love that she advocated for you from such a young age, because especially like in the 80s and early 90s, I don't think that it was as maybe prominent or talked about as it is today. Today, it's a little bit more normalized because of what Anika is saying. You know, every couple of years or every, you know, steps in school, there's like an influx of diagnoses. But I love the fact that your mom at that point in time knew enough to say to your teachers, like, just look out for these things. I think that's important.
Yeah, well, I think what I did notice is like when it came to like I would say from middle school all the way through the end of high school, I felt like I honestly just skated through school because like I mean, I did my homework, but like
I handed something in at the end of the week.
but like I never studied for tests. I never studied and I was a solid, you know, like my GPA was like in the high 80s every year, every semester. And, you know, what more could you ask from a kid? You know, they would say like, Dan, imagine if you studied, you'd be pulling straight A's. And, you know, when I got to college, I thought I could get through college the same way that I got through middle school and high school. And I flunked my first college exam, like terribly flunked my first college exam. And, but anyway, I don't know how we got onto the whole ADHD thing, but
because I was saying that it's possible that perhaps I've been undiagnosed because I feel that way, especially in the past year. Like I find it so hard sometimes. If I don't want to focus on something, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay on task. So I find my mind will wander. I have to do, you know, like exercises where I'm recentering things, because once my mind is applied to something, it gets done, you know, above and beyond. But you find that you wander, or that, you know, certain situations make you feel a little bit more traumatized and you don't want to commit as much. But that's definitely interesting. And again, like I said, I love the fact that your mom advocated for you at a time where maybe not a lot of people were considering that. We put so much pressure on our kids, man. Sometimes we just need to, like you've said previously, it's good to meet people where they're at. And I think we need to do the same with kids sometimes, and just figure out a way to creatively help them learn. Like my son is yeah, I'm not tooting my own horn, but my son is really smart, but he has such a hard time sitting still in school. And that's an issue that's definitely been brought to my attention. So sometimes we'll try, if it's possible, an alternative chair where he can like wiggle around a little bit while he's learning. And it has helped tremendously. Just a flexible chair, so that he's essentially still sitting still and doing his lesson, but he's able to move around and he doesn't feel so constricted. And it makes a world of difference. Just these little tweaks.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, Anika, how's your week been?
Oh, my week, same shit, different day. It's so funny because I've been saying that for so long. Because it really is.
Let's put that on a t-shirt.
Exactly.
Different day, right?
No, it hasn't been too bad. Like I said a couple weeks ago, so some of my charts got audited. I take insurance. And some of the insurance companies I work for, was auditing. So I sent that all in. I passed. It was fine.
Hey.
Yeah, so that was good. Um, but outside of that, there hasn't been too much. Just trying to get things ready um, for the baby. Um, Trying to stay calm, being a little uncomfortable,
Yeah.
the usual. So not too exciting, but
With the humidity, have you had any like experience with that? Because I remember I gave birth in July and my legs were like the size of tree trunks by the time I was.
they're a little swollen.
Yeah, it's the
It's
worst.
not crazy. The good part is um, we have central air, and my office has like air conditioning too. So like I haven't been sitting outside in the humidity, so it's been nice.
Good, good. Take
So
care of yourself. Put your feet up as much as possible.
I did want to get in a pool because I've heard that it's like really nice, especially at the end of the pregnancy. Um, but I just haven't had time on like the days that it's actually nice. Like
Yeah,
every time I have a day off, like today it's raining now. Like it's not a nice
Oh.
day.
I
So
know. Sad.
Well, thankfully, all the things that Michelle and I need to do are indoors.
that's good.
In
We
air
have,
conditioning.
well, it's funny you mentioned air conditioning because no, well, did I tell you about this ridiculous Anika, did I tell you about this ridiculous electric bill that I got last month?
No, but PSEG,
Yeah.
please work on your pricing.
Yes. Shout out PSEG. Stop price gouging your customers. But anyway, so when we first moved in, we had a partial bill. It was 19 days of electricity, and we had the apartment set at the thermostat set at 68 degrees,
That's pretty
right?
low.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to keep my apartment super cold. And so we got the bill $44. I was like, okay, not too bad. I can live with that,
Yeah.
right? The bill for the month of July, the next bill comes. The bill is $462.
Shut up.
Because it was estimated, right? That
Right.
$44. Yep, that's exactly what they do. They're too lazy. They pay people. Sorry to say this, but they pay people to come check the meters. Except PSEG doesn't always come actually check the meters, and
Mhm.
so it's an estimated reading based on last year. So if you've moved into a new place,
Right. So they said that
Shady.
it was an estimated bill based on the usage of the people who had the apartment for the last couple of months. So my guess was that because the apartment was vacant and they didn't have anyone living there, they weren't using the thermostat as much. Um so that's why the estimate was so low. And she was like, it should balance out the next month and whatnot. So I'm hoping that my next bill is under, at least if I could keep it under 300. I would say for the summer, like for the summer months, that's good. And then
Yeah.
obviously during the winter, the heat will be a
it'll
little
be a
bit
lot.
higher.
Yeah,
But we lowered the temperature down to we raised it to 72, and it's fine because you still get that when you come in from the outside, it's still noticeably cooler, but I want condensation on my windows. That's how cold I want my apartment to be.
Is that like a motivational thing? Like the cold helps you like focus and stay alert?
Well, one of the things that when it comes to keeping the apartment cold, I know when I drive, I like to keep it cold.
Yeah.
I would much rather drive with a jacket on and no heat than to drive with just a t-shirt and the heat on blast, just because I don't like heat. When I drive, I like to keep it cold because it keeps me awake if I'm driving a long distance.
Right.
But I don't know, I just don't like feeling restricted under a whole bunch of blankets. So, and I just like being cold. I don't know. I run cold. Michelle runs hot. I don't understand. But
Fair enough.
let's let Chelsea tell us about herself, her
yes.
podcast. before we like get on a tangent of entire podcast.
We've literally gone on a 25-minute tangent.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was Sunday coffee talk, which I love.
And the funny part is, we didn't, like, as far as our listeners are concerned, we weren't talking about anything before this. So we started on a tangent.
Yeah. Which, again, I feel like we should put that on, like, my life is a tangent. Put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Do it.
My life is a tangent.
My life is a tangent. I like it.
Okay. That we could start like a whole line of like ADHD t-shirts. My life is a tangent. Okay, so Chelsea, tell us about the Sticky Eddie podcast and like what got you started with it and all that stuff.
So the Sticky Eddie podcast is named for my dad. His name was Eddie, and he was a professional drummer who came up with the stage name Sticky. So it has two eyes to represent the little sticks. I made sure to explain that in my very first episode because I know it's confusing and people are like, what does this have to do with anything? But my dad was the addict in my life. He was an alcoholic for the majority of his life. He passed away on, I found out that he passed away on December 23rd of 2020. I want to assume actually that he was gone probably December 21st, but he lived alone and I didn't know. And so my dad was 69 when he passed away. And again, for the majority of those 69 years, he suffered with alcoholism. But my biggest problem, if you could call it that, was he was my best friend. I mean, my absolute best friend, the closest person to me. We just understood each other on definitely a higher level. And despite the fact that he was an alcoholic, he was an amazing person. Super chill, super calm, very funny, an extremely talented drummer. Just the person that everybody always wanted to be around. And so when he would drink, he was never violent, but he would drink to the point where he would be falling down, inebriated, extremely sloppy. His personality would definitely be altered. He would be obnoxious where he would think that he was being funny or flirtatious or whatever. And it would just get very uncomfortable. So there was definitely that Jekyll Hyde duality to it. But in December of 2020, we were just coming off of not having Thanksgiving together for the first time ever. COVID really messed with my dad. When you're already an addict and then you become severely depressed and isolated, it was the perfect storm. So I think right around Thanksgiving, he left a long stretch of sobriety behind and picked up again. And so by right around Christmas time, it was just to the point where he was actually starting to hallucinate and it was just really, really affecting him. My last conversation with him, I think, was around between the 18th and 19th. And I was so frustrated with his behavior that it was a really short conversation. And I was just basically to check in, make sure you're alive. All right, I gotta go. I love you. I can't deal with it. I have to go. All right, I love you too, kiddo. And I heard the sadness in his voice. Like I could hear that he was just desperate for me to really sit down for the umpteenth time and be like, what is going on? And I didn't, out of anger, because I was just constantly beating my head against the wall that this person that I love so much just refused to put it down and stop completely. And so I didn't speak to him again for several days. And I talk about this on the first episode of my show, but the morning of the 23rd, I went for a run and there was something about the pinkness in the sky. Like the sky just looked like it was on fire. And I stopped dead in my tracks and I did something that I never do. And I took a picture of it because I just felt like something about the sky was calling me. And then later that afternoon, my mom called me and she said, nobody's seen or heard from your dad in a couple of days, but the neighbors are complaining that there's like an odor in the hall. And, we're very worried about him. And I live about a half an hour away from the area that my parents are in. So I called the police to do a wellness check. And they got there really fast because they confirmed with me when they arrived at the apartment. But then I didn't hear anything back from them for several minutes. And then it was like a punch in the gut because I knew. I was like, no, this isn't right. If everything were okay, they would have called me back right away. So I jumped in the car. My husband begged me. He's like, please just wait for them to get back to you. Don't go up there just yet. And I jumped in the car. I wasn't even 5 minutes into my drive when my husband called me and said, that he found out that my dad was gone. And I don't remember getting there. I remember screaming. And then I must have been doing 200 down the Taconic.
Oof.
And I blacked out. And the next thing I knew, I was in front of my dad's apartment and facing cops who wouldn't let me in. And that was it. I never saw my dad again. So his journey and the way that his life ended really messed me up for a long time. And it's obviously something that I still deal with. But in the wake of losing him, I needed to do something to honor his legacy and try to reach out to other children of alcoholics, other people who love an addict of any sort, and see what their stories are and how they cope, how they don't cope. Whatever is going on in your life, I want to hear about it and create a community where we can lean on each other and know that we're not alone. And so the Sticky Eddie podcast was born of that horrible experience, but it has led me on an amazing journey and it's brought me to the sober highway, which is good.
Well, I've expressed my condolences to you when we first connected on your show, but we didn't really get into that whole story. So I want to express my deepest condolences again, because that's something I wouldn't want to look upon anybody.
Yeah.
Went through.
And just experiencing that loss is so difficult, right?
Yeah.
And it really changes who you are.
Right? Part of getting older as a person is understanding that at some point this will happen to your parents, but
Right.
At such a young, for this to happen at such a young age or so early on in life under these circumstances, it really does come as a shock.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I have decided to make the recent decisions that I have, because it has changed me. Grief of any kind will really give you a whole different perspective. And I just got to a point where I was like, I know that I'm capable, and I know that the skills that I do have can be lent to a different purpose. I'm so grateful for my journey and the professional skills that I've acquired over the years, but I feel like they can be best applied to something that I'm now extremely passionate about. Thankfully, there was not abuse of any kind in my background. Again, my dad was not violent. He was not abusive to myself or my mom. They did fight like cats and dogs, and they did end up eventually divorcing. But, I know that there are people that have met much different stories. But the premise of the show was, I never said anything as a kid to my friends or anybody about what was happening. And a lot of people didn't know. And because my dad was a musician, it didn't look inappropriate that he should go play at a bar and have a couple of drinks. So this was very well, quote unquote, disguised, if you will. And I cannot be the only child who lived that way and is dealing with that frustration. You feel like you're on a merry-go-round, because my dad would definitely be sober for very long stretches of time, years sometimes. And then something would happen and he would pick back up. After he passed away and I was going through his bank statements, actually, I realized that for the last week of his life, every other day he was going to the liquor store and he was buying those like massive Macallan's jugs of whiskey. And they were like the $24.99 bottle. And they were lasting a day or two. So his official cause of death was actually a GI problem, a GI bleed. And it just comes from years and years of slowly drinking yourself to death. And it's incredible. It's just it's very sad and heartbreaking when you feel like you can't stop someone you love from doing this to themselves.
Well,
Agreed.
Yeah, it's one of those experiences, I think, that like you want them to change so bad, right? And
Yeah.
even the fact that you said like, like your dad wasn't violent and like it was kind of like socially acceptable with the profession he had and career, right? Like I think a lot of people do have those experiences too, right? Like I think there's this like misconception again that like anybody that's either like struggles with alcohol or drugs, like that they're violent or they're mean or right. And like that's not always the case. There's a lot of people that, people would describe them as like, oh, well, they're just like the chatty Cathy and they're the life of the party and like they're super sweet and they just get like too messy when they drink, right?
Yes.
And so it's really hard to like rationalize too, I think, and like recognize like, well, that could potentially really be a problem. Like you don't know somebody's full story and what they're struggling with. And then thinking about too, like somebody's full life, which it sounds like that's like really what your podcast is trying to explore too, right? Is the fact that like, he was a dad, he was, a husband, he was a brother, a son, like he had so many different roles in his life. He was a musician, like there were all these other things outside of alcohol too. And alcohol complicated those relationships. But like he had so many things that like people loved about him. And that's what I'm getting from you. And it's making me a little emotional because I think, like people don't always recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's that's the hardest part. I'm looking at a picture of him and I right now. But that's the hardest part. And don't worry, because I cry like every 5 minutes.
She cried when we talked last week.
I cried on my own podcast. I lost it a little bit.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all good.
Because it's so hard. And I'm learning so much about protocol as it were, as it applies to grief and how you deal with things. And Suzanne, a former guest of my own show, and I have actually done a show about things that
future guest on our show.
Yes, a future sober highway guest. I'm so excited. She and I spoke about things that helped us in our grief, and that's the thing. When you pass away from an addiction, people often judge you even if they didn't know that you were an addict your whole life. When they find out that you passed away from an addiction, it's automatically like, they must have been like a scumbag, or they, that must have been all they cared about. How could they do that to their family? One thing that I've really come to grips with in doing my show is, and Dan reinforced it last week on my own show, I really needed to be better at meeting my dad at his level and saying to him, I can't pretend to know why you do what you do, and I can't pretend to know your motivation behind it. I have to step back from that part, but I am always here. And if I had reinforced that more, instead of giving my dad ultimatums, well, if you don't knock it off, I can't let you be around my son, and all of that. Instead of doing that, I should have just tried to support him as he was, because that's the thing with addiction, guys. You're not going to stop until you are ready.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to commit to it until you are ready. And it's sad to say, because you might have several trips to the hospital before that happens. My dad had a small stroke. I didn't hear him speak for almost 3 weeks. Thankfully, his speech came back with some rehabilitation, and it wasn't a long-term thing. But that was the point where I thought, okay, the doctor's looking at us in the hospital and telling us, if you keep going, Mr. Crucy, you're going to die. And he's, just, okay. So it's a hard thing to grapple with. It takes a lot of support. But that's also another thing that I hope comes through in my show. We are a community. There are other people here that are in the same position. There are resources and things that I'm trying to bring more to the forefront that I had no idea existed, not only for the addicts themselves, but for the people in their lives that are suffering. So that's a long-term goal that I hope to accomplish as well. Just bring more information out into the open, instead of people constantly having to do deep Google dives and really seek it out. I want to make it more prominently available to people at a glance, so to speak. But yeah, my dad had a lot of levels. He was an amazing grandfather. He was just a magnetic person.
Everybody wanted to be around him.
Oh, 100%. He had such a great sense of humor. He was tall and handsome. He had a Clint Eastwood kind of squint, but if he liked you, there was always like a twinkle in his eye to let you know, like, I look mean, but it's really okay. And there's actually a huge car show going on later today that he and I always used to frequent together, because he got me into vintage cars as a kid. And so things like that always make me think of him. I miss him every day, but I have to do something to honor him. He deserved it.
So let me ask you this, just a quick tangent.
Yeah, of course.
You said you love classic cars. So were you guys Chevy people, Ford people, Dodge people? Like, I got to know.
Okay, so my favorite car is a 68 Fastback. So I lean toward Ford.
Okay.
But I'm also a Hudson person, and I also love a Chevy Bel Air, a 57 Chevy Bel Air.
Okay.
My dad's favorite Impala, I want to say his was the 59. Mine is the 61, I think, for the taillights. And then one of the coolest things that he taught me as a kid was on a 53 Cadillac, the gas tank is actually in the taillight. So there's a little button that you can press under your dash, and it flips down the taillight, and that's how you pump your gas.
Yeah.
So little tidbits like this, Eddie was full of those. And every time I see, so it's funny, there is a 54 Purple Mercury with a white leather interior and a DeSoto grill. This thing is magical. I call it my unicorn, because every time I get to a show, it is just leaving. And I never get a chance to talk to the owner. And in the wake of my dad passing, I have seen it twice in the most random places. I just saw it upstate in Ithaca. I was coming home, so I was on one side of the highway, and the thing passed me on the other side, and I was like, holy shit. I started pounding the dashboard. I was like, oh my God, that's such a nice sign. But yeah, I think we're all over the place. I don't think that I lean more towards Ford or Chevy. It just has to be heavy metal and beautiful.
Okay.
Well, I think your unicorn is a sign, and I think you're going to be seeing more of it.
I hope so, but I will say, shout out to Ford. Your Mach-E is not a Mustang. How dare you?
Agreed.
I saw one in a Target parking lot the other day, and there was a shopping cart careening toward it, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't stop it.
Even though you could have.
I could have easily stopped it. So I'm sorry, whatever that does to my karma, but it's not a real Mustang, so you shouldn't be driving it to begin with.
Can I just say, I had never really like driven like a real like muscle car before until like a couple years ago when I took Michelle on a day trip to Montauk, and we rented a Mustang convertible, and we drove out to Montauk. We spent the day out there and whatnot. And let me tell, and this wasn't this wasn't like a regular V6 Mustang. It was a Mustang GT, so it had the big 5-liter V8 in it.
Yes.
And I had never driven a car with a V8 before.
Oh.
And so I'll tell this really quick story, and then we'll get back to to what we were talking about. Anika, keep a note of it so we don't forget.
I will.
So I rented this car from an exotic car rental dealership. And so, they were going over all the features of the car, whatever. And so the first thing I did before I picked up Michelle was, because she was living with her parents upstate at the time, I drove over to my buddy Anthony's house and I showed him the car. I was like, dude, you got to check this thing out. This thing's fucking sick. And he goes, all right, let's put the top down. So we put the top down, whatever. And he goes, let's get it on the highway. Let's open it up. So I get it on the highway, and he's like, fucking step on it. And I freaking put my foot through the floor, and now we're doing 115 miles an hour down the LIE.
Oh my God.
And it was the most amazing thing ever. And then all of a sudden, I had my phone hooked up to the car, and my phone was going off. It was ringing. So I was like, I'm not answering it because I'm not trying. I don't want to die. I'm going over 100 miles an hour in a car that's not mine. I'm not trying to crash. And the top's down, so if the car rolls over, we're dead.
Yeah,
we're dead. So we're dead. So I was like, all right, I'm done. I got my fix, and we pull over, and it turns out that it was the rental car company because they put a tracker in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And
saw that one coming.
Yeah, so I called them, and I was like, what's going on? And they were like, well, we got a high speed alert on the car. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Like, this is the first time I've really driven like a fast car before. Like, I just wanted to see like what it was like and whatnot. And they were like, yeah, unfortunately you can't be doing that. So like, if we get another high speed alert on your car, we're gonna like hold back your security deposit. So,
oh, bummer.
So they basically said you need to keep it under 100.
Oh, they should have been. I don't know.
And what bothers me, what pissed me off is like this dealership, like they rent out like Ferraris, Lamborghinis. Like,
what are you? Oh.
How do you give someone the keys to a Lamborghini and tell them keep it under 100?
I don't know. You got me because I would just tell them as soon as I picked up the car, just keep the deposit. It's yours. Because
well, I needed that deposit back. So.
I mean, we all do, of course. But I couldn't. There's no way I wouldn't be able to help myself, especially where I live. There's long stretches of straightaway highway where if you hit the right time of day, there's no one around, and you gotta know where the cops sit. So my head is always on a swivel, and my husband is like, "Why don't you just drive like a normal person, and you won't have to be so neurotic?" And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry.
And here's the best part. The story doesn't end there. So when we brought once I picked up Michelle, I called my cousin Lindsay, and I told her what happened. And she decided, she's basically like my sister, even though I don't have any siblings. And she thought it would be a good idea to call my parents. And my parents, in the presence of my aunt and uncle, Lindsay's parents, he called me and he goes, I answer the phone and he's like, Dan, are you out of your fucking mind? And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, did you just get caught speeding or something? And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, were you or were you not just driving 110 miles an hour on the LIE in a red Mustang. And I was like, how the fuck did you know that? He goes, I just got off the phone with the New York State troopers.
What?
And they said that they caught you on radar.
Oh my God.
Going 110 miles an hour in a red Mustang. And I don't like, I just had to talk them out of putting out a warrant for your arrest and taking you to jail.
Oh God.
And my dumbass thought that the rental company called him because his name is the one that's on the insurance policy that I gave them. So he was pissed, and they called the police, and the police called my dad. So I'm nervous, like, am I fucking going to jail? Like, what the hell's gonna happen? And he goes, you better bring that car back right now. I'm like, I'm not bringing this car back. I still got 2 days on this rental. Hell no. And he's like, your mother's gonna fucking kill you. And I'm like literally almost about to cry. And Michelle's sitting in the passenger seat. And then my dad starts laughing. And I'm like, what the hell are you laughing about? Like, I'm about to go to jail. He goes, Dad, I'm fucking with you.
Oh my God. See, I'm such an easy target. I would have totally fed into that too. I would have been crying. Like, I'm so sorry.
And I was like, so then how did you find out? He goes, your cousin Lindsay called me. Oh my God. I had never been more scared in my life.
Oh my God. See, my dad bought me an Eclipse as my first car. It was used and it was turbocharged and it was red and it was a rocket ship. And I don't know what he was thinking. But the first day we ever got in the car on one of my first driving lessons, and I put my foot up to the gas, and he was like, oh no, this is a problem. So I've never been one to go slow or obey speed limits, and I'm sorry to whoever that bothers, but I don't care. When my son is in the car, of course, it's a different story.
You go a little bit slower.
Yes, I'm all about the safety when my kiddo is in the car. But man, there's nothing like a muscle car and a big engine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Anika, where did we leave off before we went on this tangent?
So no, we were just talking about, Chelsea's dad and like, kind of who he was, right? And like how to honor his memory. And so like my question is like, so far on this journey of using the podcast basically as like this positive platform to help other people, what have you learned so far?
So, it's really funny. I thought that I knew everything there was to know about my dad. So it's interesting because I'm learning so much about myself, but it's odd. I'm also learning more about what maybe made my dad tick a little bit. As I talk to people, especially who have struggled with alcohol addiction, a lot of them have things in common. Be it trauma in the childhood or trauma in a school type setting. I used to ask my dad every once in a while if we were having a particularly deep conversation. I would say to him, is there something maybe that happened to you that you're trying to repress, that you're not allowing to come to the surface, that's perhaps fueling this fire inside of you to need to forget? And he never was very clear about that. I do know that my grandparents, who I didn't really know them very well, but my dad's parents were both also alcoholics. So it does run in our bloodline. But he never mentioned any outward trauma, but I would always get the sense that there may have been something there. But really what I'm learning is people drink a lot of times to forget, to numb the pain. My dad always used to say that he just liked how it made his head feel. He would feel very in the zone. It would help him relax. That I know of, or that I saw when I would follow the bands around. I never saw that it affected his performance in that way. So I'm really learning that there's always more to the picture. We have to erase the stigma that surrounds addiction because it's completely unfair. And my dad was the perfect example. He taught me about cars. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me how to throw a football. Music. I love the blues and all the music that I love. I mean, because of him, we had conversations about artists that people don't talk about these days. There's so much of my life that went with him that I didn't have a connection, like that with anybody else. So I'm starting to realize you have to be gentle with the people that you love. Ask them more questions about themselves and try. I know it's so hard. Believe me, guys, I know. But try so hard to be selfless as it applies to them instead of looking so much at how bad it makes you feel. Because you think that your life would be easier maybe without them and without their addiction, but it's 100,000 times worse when they're not here anymore. I'd give anything for a million more chances to spend time with him, even if he was falling down drunk, than to sit here and just think about all the things that I can't do with him anymore.
And all the things that you could have done with all the information that you have now.
Exactly. But see, that's the tricky thing, Dan. It sucks that I don't have these resources and he's here. It never dawned on me while he was here to chase down that information and to see what support I could have given myself in order to support him better. So I would love if my podcast or if the Sober Highway or any of the other resources out there can save one person's time by giving them the idea, chase down a social worker or two, chase down books and webinars and TED Talks and anything that you feel might give you a toolkit. Dan and I spoke about that a little bit on my last episode. I now have my own little toolkit that I can reach for, and I would love to share that with people. But God damn it, I wish I had it 8 months ago. I wish I could rewind time, back to November. November 12th is my birthday, and we spent my birthday this past year together. We went to my favorite coffee shop in Peekskill and walked along the riverfront. And it was just the two of us, and it was such a dreary afternoon, but we had such a great day together. And I wish if there were any moment in time that I could rewind to, it would be that day and just say, like, I'm here with you no matter what. But I can't, so I continue learning about resources like, I didn't know, for example, that you could go to Al-Anon meetings and take from that, not being an addict. Like it's so naive, but I had no information. I didn't know that you could go to groups as the child of someone who was suffering instead of the person suffering themselves. Doesn't that sound kind of insane? Like, how could I not know that? I lived with an addict my whole life.
Well, you can't. One of the things that, like, I always try to help people, like, recognize is, like, you can't know what you didn't know.
Right.
Like, you always try to think, like, well, I could have, I should have, if I could go back, right? But, like, that's not where you were. You did the best with what you knew at the time. Right. And so now you know differently. And that's where there's a lot of power in that is, now I know differently. Now I can help other people. Right. And maybe that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
And I would also argue that I think that, I think your father would be very proud to know that you're taking that information that you have now and using it to help other people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Don't do it. Are you an only child too?
I am.
All right.
I am.
Only child team. Yeah.
And see, I don't know if that makes it better or worse sometimes because, I had all of the attention growing up. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why my dad and I were so close. But again, in moments like this, I wish I had a little bit more of a team. So there's duality in everything is another thing that I'm coming to realize. But it's it's so interesting to see what an addict might feel like. And I've loved having conversations on my show with people in recovery, because now if they're in recovery, they're committed to this whole new life. And sadly, you have to dodge almost marketing bullets everywhere you go when you're in recovery, because it's everywhere. Alcohol is everywhere. And it is so normalized that people look at you like you're odd when you're not drinking. And it's something that you really have to concentrate on. So it's funny, when you were speaking earlier, Anika, I was thinking of the episode of Friends. I don't know who out there is a fan.
Go ahead.
So I was thinking of an earlier episode with Fun Bobby, when Monica convinces Fun Bobby not to drink, and he's such a bummer now because he's not drinking, that he like knocks on the door, and even his knock is sad, and it just becomes such a problem that in turn Monica needs to drink to numb the pain of the boredom that comes from being around this guy who's now like so depressing because he's forced to face his demons.
Another
what were you going
tangent.
to say? Yeah.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Were they on a break?
I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry. Yes, they were on a break.
Thank you.
But they were on a break. But if Ross really loved her as much as he always claimed that he did, I think you could have waited 24 hours before putting it in someone else's pants. I'm just saying, like,
yeah,
there was a little bit of an ethical dilemma there. However, they were on a break. You did say, let's take a break. I don't think she expected him to jump into bed with Chloe, the copy girl, so fast, but you know.
Anika, are you a Friends fan at all?
I watched episodes here and there, but no, I'm not.
Yeah. And it didn't suck you in? It didn't grab you?
No.
Oh man.
I think I'm gonna make the title of this episode the one with the Stiicky Eddie podcast.
I love that. I would be so honored. I am obsessed with Friends. It's my favorite show ever. So much so that I'm actually writing a final paper on it right now for my pop culture course. Like it's deep.
Have you been to the Friends experience in the city?
No, I'm dying to go, but I'm very nervous about the state of the city right now. It feels like there's a lot of drama happening in Manhattan. So I'm trying to stay safe. But I've seen pictures from other people I know that have gone, and it looks so sick. I'm very excited to go.
Let me tell you, Times Square is absolutely crazy right now. Really? I think it was Friday. No. It was. I think it was Friday. Instead of taking the subway from where I work in Manhattan down to Penn, I decided to rent a moped, and I rode the moped down from Upper Manhattan down to Penn, and you're not supposed to take the moped on the highway, so I put it. I don't want to go on the highway. And
you learned your lesson.
Well, it took me just as long as if I had driven there. It was twice as long as it took me twice as long as the subway. And so I rode all the way down Columbus. I went right past Columbus Circle.
That's a nice ride.
And then I went down 7th Avenue, drove right through the heart of Times Square. And oh my God, it was terrible. Like there were so many people. And I don't know how people feel, like, regardless of like what your take is on masks or the vaccines. I don't want to take a political stance here on the podcast, but like there were a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It's not even that though, it's just the violence that seems to be erupting all over.
I mean, to be honest with you, like I don't really spend that much time on the streets when I'm working in Manhattan. Like when I commute, I get on the railroad on the island, and then I don't go outside again until I get to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really see what's going on outside. And when I do go outside while I'm at work, it's usually just to run to the deli to grab a sandwich and a soda.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really tell you. But we do get a lot of, you could imagine, in the part of Manhattan where I am, we do get a lot of, stab wounds coming in, GSWs coming in. And, most of them don't make it. And
Yeah.
that's just part of that. I think that just comes with being in that part of the city.
Such a shame.
But anyway, Anika, where were we?
I feel like the timekeeper.
I love
do you call it the barometer, the navigator?
I like that.
The problem is right now, normally I'm like really like on top of it, but like the prego brains like take it over and I'm like,
oh, it's so real.
And I'm just like zoning.
Here's the sparkly object.
And it's so not how I normally am.
No, but it's so real. It's such a real thing. And we have to be gentle with our pregnant women out there. Like seriously, it's hard. Be kind to pregnant women.
But I think we got off on this tangent because we were talking with Chelsea about kind of like giving like finding a way to like get people information, right?
Yes.
Resources, things like that. Kind of what her goal is in doing this and like using this, like, because I see this as kind of like this is like one of the greatest tools to heal too, right?
Yeah.
Is to be able to work through it, share what you learn, so that, like you said, like, so somebody else doesn't have to have the same struggle, or somebody else doesn't have to go through what I went through, because it just makes their life a little bit easier. Because there are resources out there. There are a lot of things that you can do. And it's so interesting because, again, I don't think that people really talk enough about it because it's so stigmatized, right? Like you said, like, I didn't realize I could go to Al-Anon. I didn't realize I could go to Adult Children of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I didn't realize like any of these things like either existed, that I could go to them, that they were free, that for some people working the full program works. For some people, going to a couple meetings and getting what you need works.
Right.
There's support groups out there through local, drug and alcohol facilities, mental health agencies. Right. There's like finding your own therapist. I mean, there's so many different ways to connect with people and to work through it. And if you can find an outlet that is helpful for you, why the hell wouldn't you, right? If you can ease that burden and pain.
Good golly.
And one of the best parts about you being from New York is that you can go to programs like an outpatient program, and you can ask them, like, do you have services for significant others of people in recovery? And you can see a therapist who has expertise on these things, and you could even join like a group that's run by a clinician, and you could learn like actual coping mechanisms to help you get through what it is that you're dealing with. And I always tell, I mean, Anika, maybe you would agree with me, but when it comes to recovery, I think there's no better person to help someone in recovery than another person in recovery. Mm-hmm. But I also think like the same thing goes for what you're dealing with, Chelsea, is that there's no better person to help someone through the situation that you're going through than another person who's going through the exact same thing. However, there are certain things at the same time that a clinician can help you accomplish that, I don't want to call it a lay person, but like someone who's not a clinician might not be able to help you make certain connections that a clinician
absolutely could. No, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, I would call myself a lay person for sure, because there are a lot of things that I've discussed with people in, a more clinician based field, or a clinical setting, I should say, pardon me, morning brain.
It's all good.
But yeah, there are tons of things that I've gotten from speaking with trauma therapists, social workers, psychotherapists that a person like myself, again, has no idea. I'm not equipped with the jargon. I'm not equipped with the technicalities of it. So the other thing though that I'm trying to cultivate is a very safe space. So particularly on the show, anybody who comes is never judged. I don't care what your status is. I don't care if we're going to finish having a conversation and you go shoot up afterward. I just want to know what makes you tick, where your particular addiction stems from, and how it's affecting your life. What are your thoughts on your process? Where do you see your journey going? If you're in recovery, how did you get there? But my goal in life is no longer to judge. I spent way too much judging the person that I loved the most in the universe. And it got me nowhere. You know, it just, now I'm in a whole different realm. And so, yeah, I would really love to be that little Chelsea voice for all the other Chelseas out there who just are little kids struggling and listening to their parents fight and wondering what the heck is going on and why is there so much drama. And, you know, maybe if I had known things when I was a little bit younger, it would have just evolved. Just like when you don't realize you have ADHD until you're at a certain stage. Maybe there was a point where my trauma just hit a level and I was just so unprepared to deal with it that I wasn't capable of saying to my dad, like, oh, I'm here, rather than I cannot deal with this anymore. This is a merry-go-round that I have to get off of. Like, please, you know, call me when you're sober. That was the wrong thing to do. 100%.
Did you just reference an Evanescence song?
Did I?
Call Me When You're Sober? You didn't know that?
No, I'm sorry, Amy Lee. I'm not one for Evanescence.
But actually listen to that song. It's actually a really good song. And I forgot what I was gonna say. Damn it. So Anika had asked a little bit of what my goal was. So I'm actually working on maybe cultivating a Stiicky Eddie website. Okay.
Where all of the resources that I've amassed can be available. Right now, what I do is I put anything that I come across that I feel might be helpful in my show notes. And I always try to plug that's there. When I post on Instagram or at the end of each episode, I'll make mention, like, please check my show notes. And I do try to make little lists for people. But I think it would just be helpful to just keep saying it. Like, I'm here. I am here. If anybody wants to talk to me, I am here. I am a resource. I will do whatever I can to help you. I literally am coming from a career where I was an executive assistant. So I know how to multitask and run the show. Like, I can help you. Just if there's anything I can do for anyone that's suffering, I'm down for sure.
Well, when you do finally get your site up and running, if you want to, take links for, the episode, like, hopefully I want to have you on as often as possible.
Yeah.
And, when the time comes that you launch your website, if you want to take like embed links for all of your episodes to put them on your website, you are more than welcome to do that. I'll give you those, whatever you need.
That would be great, guys.
But for those that are listening and watching, because we have 2 viewers now. What? We had 3. We're down to 2, but we had 3. Where can people find you?
So right now I'm not too deep on social media. I am on Instagram at Chels Runs Around, and also the Stiicky Eddie podcast has an Instagram. It is really, really new and fresh. So there's not much content there yet.
Okay.
So I'd rather people reach out to me at Chels Runs Around right now, and then you'll see Stiicky Eddie content on there. You can email the show at stickyeddie@gmail.com, which is STIICKYEDDIE podcast@gmail.com. The handle for the Sticky Eddie podcast IG is _Sticky_Eddie_podcast.
Do me a favor. Send me all of that stuff
I will.
in an email. Like
I
you can
will.
just respond to the email that I sent you before.
Sure.
And I'll link everything in the show notes.
Yeah. The show itself is on Spotify, iHeart, Odyssey, Google Podcasts. I'm still trying like the Dickens to get up on Apple Podcasts. I don't know what is taking so long.
Do you use a host, like a podcast host?
I do, yeah.
Which one do you use?
I'm working with Podbean right now. It's an Apple thing. It's not. I don't think it's a Podbean issue, but we're working on it. I'll keep everybody posted so they can give me 5-star ratings all the way.
Sounds good. Well, Chelsea, you've been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on here and for sharing a little bit about your story, what led you here, how our listeners can find you.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's really inspiring to have somebody that is so passionate about, their own journey and like working through and helping other people, right? And like coming from the perspective of a family member, right?
Thank you, Anika. That's so nice.
Our door is always open. Whenever you want to come on the show, you just call us and let us know. If you ever have any guests on the show that you think would be good for us,
100%.
let us know, and we will do the same for you.
Thank you. It's all about support. I love it. I'm so grateful for this community. I wish that we had just met each other at a car show, but but I'm grateful to be here, and thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
All right. So I think that's going to do it. So I'll end the live stream. But before I do that, let me just plug all of our stuff. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. If you enjoyed this amazing conversation with Chelsea, make sure to follow The Sober Highway for more stuff like this. You can catch us on our episodes go live on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Follow us on all of our social medias to stay up to date on content. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Get involved with our TikTok campaign to get AJ McLean from the Backstreet Boys on the Sober Highway podcast. Please, please, please. We really, really want him on the show. If you have any questions, that you'd like Anika and I to answer on the podcast, you can either DM us on any of our social media platforms, or you can send us an email at thesoberhighway@gmail.com. Anika, do you have anything else?
Nope. Chelsea,
anything else?
I will say, if AJ is listening, I had a poster of you on my ceiling growing up, and it would blow my mind if you came on the Sober Highway. So please, 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 I want it that way, on the Sober Highway. I don't care how that sounded. Come on the show.
We're leaving that in. Well, thanks, everybody, and we will catch you next week. Bye-bye.